Good morning and welcome back to the Turtle Wins the Race Home-Based Business Podcast. My name is Kara Bunton and I've owned a home-based business since 1999, and somebody pointed out that's 25 years. So that's what we talk about here. So yeah, after 25 years, I've picked up a few tips. All right. I've also gone through a lot, just, like my inner self. But I think what I want to talk about today is something that we all go through, which is imposter syndrome. Now, I have done a podcast. I did check back because I'm like, I think I've talked about this before. You would think, because this is something that everybody probably goes through, but maybe not. All right. And I was thinking about this because it was a post in the Facebook group, in my Facebook group for online sellers. And I do want to read it. It says, I tend to overthink, over criticize, scrap, or get stuck and never finish so many projects because I think they're stupid or not good enough. It also impacts my marketing. I don't really tell people about my business because I think it's not good enough. Same about social media. I can't make anything as interesting or as talented as others, so why bother? All that self-deprecating kind of stuff. Yeah, this is very common. And I think that most people do experience this at some point, and this is completely self-imposed. Okay, although I will say that it comes from somewhere, right? And when I had a course called Turtle Wins the Race, which is kind of my flagship course, the first one I ever sold to sellers, like an actual program course, right? And it was about kind of getting past these self-doubts, or part of it was, not all of it was, but there was a whole section in there about getting past this kind of stuff and figuring out where these ideas come from. Because the idea that you're not good enough or you're not good enough at what you do comes from somewhere. And like that person said, it could come from comparing yourself to other people on social media, which we know is lies. We know there's a lot of filters. We know there's a lot of editing. There's a lot of stuff that's on social media that isn't even real. I mean, I go on social media now and it's full of AI images that don't exist. But you still, I mean, your brain is still going to compare yourself to that, because even if you know that it's not something that you could ever attain because it doesn't make sense according to the laws of gravity or whatever it is, you still have that image in your brain and you think, oh my God, I know that's fake, but my stuff isn't ever going to be able to hover over whatever it is. And it does impact you. It impacts the way that you think about yourself and your products. But the class was about kind of getting to the root of what makes you feel like you're not good enough to do what you do. And honestly, if you feel like you can sell your stuff, then you're good enough. Okay. And this is what I kind of mentioned though at the beginning, the imposter syndrome thing. I think that most of us do kind of experience imposter syndrome at some point. I don't think everybody does. I think that there are people who are so overconfident and just completely delusional about their abilities that they just go out and act like they deserve everything and they're just kind of entitled to whatever success they get. And if something happens that they're not successful, it's not their fault. Something else did it. You know the type, right? And there is, I don't remember the name of the psychological phenomenon, but there is a psychological phenomenon that if you don't, like, the people with less abilities tend to overestimate their ability. And people who are very good at something tend to underestimate their abilities. And it's all, basically it's describing like someone who is really, really smart but says, oh, I don't know, versus someone who doesn't know what the hell they're talking about and they're just a blowhard and they're constantly telling you what to do. And that's just the way that's my way of summing up that study. But there is an actual thing. This is something that happens. It's something that exists, that you tend to overestimate your abilities if you don't know. And if you do know, you tend to kind of play it down. All right. So I do think that there are people who don't suffer from imposter syndrome and they're just conceited jerks. And I won't say the word I was going to say because YouTube might demonetize me. But yeah, I think that if you do have imposter syndrome at some point, and I don't want to say if you suffer from it, because everybody experiences this at some point. I think that you just need to stop and kind of actually take a real inventory of what the reality is. Because I could go, I used to play piano. I took piano lessons. My mother's entire family are professional musicians. It was pounded into my head, the music. I played different instruments as I was growing up, but I have a piano. I have like my mother's real piano. It's a good piano, but it's in there and I don't play it. If I told myself I could sit down and play the way that I did when I was younger and practiced every day, that would be insane, right? But somewhere in the back of my head is the thought that if I went and worked at it, I could probably get to that point again, and I probably could. But you have to have a realistic idea of your abilities at that point in your life. And I think that a lot of imposter syndrome comes from people telling you like years ago, oh, that isn't very good. That's not very good. You need to get better. But you might have gotten better, right? You might be really good at what you do. And I assume that most of the people who are watching this probably are really good at something that you do. There are always going to be things that you don't know how to do. And it's okay to not be good at everything. I mean, nobody knows everything, although there are definitely people who think that they do, like I said. But nobody knows everything. You're always going to have to learn something if you decide to sell your products, and then you have to learn the marketing, like she was talking about the marketing of it. And just, the idea of telling people about what you do can be very frightening for people who have experienced in the past people saying, oh, whatever, oh, that's a cute little thing you're doing. So I think that if you experience imposter syndrome every now and then, it's normal. It's completely normal. And you just have to kind of sit back and say, okay, I know that I'm not great at everything. I know that I don't know everything, but I'm pretty damn good at this. Like, I'm good at this. But if there's something that you don't know about, you can always learn about it. That's okay. If you have imposter syndrome all the time, like everything you do, you don't feel good enough. Everything you do, you don't feel like it's going to be accepted. That's probably coming from somewhere back in your past. And let's get all psychological here. This is not necessarily a therapy thing, but I think that you do need to sit down and kind of look at where that comes from. And if you really stop to think, and if you're really honest with yourself, then you can probably figure it out. Okay, it's probably someone in your family or a friend, quote unquote friend. And I love the term frenemy. And that started being, I don't know when people started using that word frenemy, it encapsulates so much, because there are people who are not your friends, but they're your friends. You know what I mean? And sometimes they're the ones who are knocking you down. And they, for whatever reason, I don't know why, I'm not going to stop and start analyzing people's motivations. What you need to do is look at how you react to that. And part of it could be that you are just an introvert. You don't like the attention. Part of it could be that you're just kind of sensitive. Part of it could be that when you were growing up, people picked on you. And so you're always kind of looking at things as a threat. But I think if you stop and actually try to figure out, like if you're constantly saying, I don't want to tell people about my business because it makes me nervous. Why? And you need to sit and think about that. And I will say that probably my neighbors have no idea what I do. And they're probably family members. I still have family members who think that I make wedding cakes, right? They that's what they think that I do. And I run into people now who I knew a long time ago, and they're like, oh, are you still doing cakes? I'm like, no. And they're like, oh, okay. And that's one thing. But when you have people who are really close to you who don't know what you do, either they're just not interested, and that's fine. I'm thinking the family members that I know who don't know what I do, I don't talk to them that much. So big deal. But if you have people who are very close to you who don't know what you do because you don't tell them, and you see them a lot and you talk to them a lot and they still don't know what you do, you need to look into that. Okay. But imposter syndrome, it's one thing to not want to tell people what you do because you don't want criticism. It's another thing to think that you can't do that thing. Okay. So I think it's kind of two separate things. There's imposter syndrome, and then there's not wanting to tell people what you do because you're afraid of criticism. But you really should get over it. And it's easy to say that. And I will say we never 100% get over it, but you really need to try to figure out why you're afraid to do certain things and why you're so hard on yourself. And one way to do that is just to sit down and actually think about what are the things that make a list. What are the things you're really good at? Okay. And then make a list. What are the things I want to learn? Don't say things that you're bad at. It's just stuff that you haven't learned yet. And I think that part of the problem with running a business is that there are always things that you're going to have to learn. And there are always things that you're not going to be great at because you're learning them. You're in the process of learning them. So you might be really, really good at making the thing that you sell, but you might not be good at the social media because you haven't learned it yet. You don't know exactly what to post. It doesn't really get you results when you do. And because you are worried about criticism, here that comes into play. And it's not necessarily imposter syndrome in that situation. It's just being afraid of being criticized. And again, you need to figure that out. Just understand that you're always going to get criticism. No matter what you do, someone's going to have something to say. And I have talked on this podcast before about just telling people to shut up. And there are certain people that need to be told to shut up. And I have told people to shut up before, and they're always so taken aback that someone is challenging them and maybe pointing out the flaw in their logic that they generally shut up. And if there is someone in your life who is so negative that they are your frenemy, just don't hang out with them anymore. You don't have to. You don't have to. And, this comes up a lot when people talk about, should you delete negative social media posts? Okay. Yeah, I think, yeah, you should. And then I get people on my YouTube channel who I think, I don't know, they're usually incoherent. Their comments are a little incoherent. But I think that they're criticizing me because I tend to delete rude comments and block people on YouTube if they make rude comments. I don't care, because just because you put yourself out in public, it doesn't give people the right to then come in and say nasty things about you. It's one thing if someone has like counterpoint, and you're kind of talking about a subject and you're saying, okay, well, maybe that makes sense. But if someone comes in and says you're an idiot, then no, you wouldn't say that well, maybe they would say that to someone in real life. See, this is the thing. Some people are just jerks. But if you're a jerk, and if someone is being a jerk to you, then there's no permission for that. Okay. I have not given permission for people to be rude to me about my business. And if I told someone I sell cake decorations and they had something to say, I would have something to say back. Right. And then I probably wouldn't hang out with them anymore. And it's the same thing if you go through this process with yourself and try to figure out, like, why am I so nervous about this? Is it because I feel like I don't know enough about this one piece of it? Well, you can learn that. You can go learn that. That's fine. And you're never, like I said, you're never going to know everything. But if it's because you're thinking, oh, I'm really worried about what my cousin will say, then maybe you need to think about your cousin. And is your cousin the kind of person who always has something to say to you? And if that's the case, why do you even hang out with them? Why do you if you know that no matter what you do, this person is going to have something to say, then you don't even need to take their opinion seriously, because it's just, they're programmed to be negative to you, and there's no need for that. All right. So that's not valid. You have to say, is this criticism valid or invalid? And a lot of criticism is invalid. But it all kind of circles back to feeling like you are an imposter, feeling like what you do isn't good enough. But, sometimes when you feel that way, if you're in my Facebook group, or if you want to post a comment here, you can post comments here on YouTube, which a lot of people won't want to do, because then it opens them up to public, ridicule, if that's what they think, but not on my channel, because I delete negative comments. Okay. And I know that a lot of people are like, you should leave all the negative comments up. And I'm like, what purpose does that serve? What purpose does that serve in giving some Like you giving your cousin a place to come and criticize you. If all they're going to say is negative, what purpose does that serve? So in your life, if you have someone who is so negative that it kind of leaks over and affects everything else that you think about yourself, and if you think about imposter syndrome, I guarantee you that there is someone in your past who has said something to you, and that's what's making you feel that way. You need to really sit down and think about this, okay? Because the reality is that no one is good at everything. There's a lot of lies posted online. Social media is fake. We all know this. And I know that this is a very kind of circuitous roundabout thing, but this is me talking. This is a podcast, okay? And I'll probably get people criticizing me for that. Fine, go listen to somebody who reads off a script. It doesn't happen here. But yeah, if you want to just delete the negativity, then go right ahead, because it makes it nicer for you. It keeps the air clear so you can be a little more objective about the reality of what you're good at and what you need to learn. Don't think of things as what you're good at and what you're bad at. Think of things as what you're good at and what you need to learn. And even the things that you're good at, you can always learn more about. There's always something to learn, like I said. I would say, I know I was going to say something else, and my mind, this podcast format just lets me talk. So a lot of times my train of thought will get derailed. But I think I know what I was going to say with the imposter thing, like the mention of not wanting to put a new product out there, not wanting to hit publish on your website. That's a really common one. People are very afraid to turn on your website. Nobody's going to see it at first unless you tell them go look at it, unless you put links there. No one's going to find your website. It takes a long time for search engines to find it. Your friends aren't going to be searching for it unless they're bitter about something, they're stalking you, in which case, why are they your friends? That's a frenemy, okay? But yeah, just go ahead and hit publish. It's better to hit publish and then go back and work on it, improve things. I was over on my website, one of my websites, I have multiple websites. I was on two of my websites this morning, tweaking things and changing things around. I changed a bunch of text to buttons. That's what I was working on today. There's always something that's going to be in need of improvement. It's never going to be perfect. It doesn't mean that I'm an imposter and I don't know how to put a website up. It just means that I've changed my mind about something. I'm going to go make something different. Just hit publish, and don't be afraid to put new products out there. If they don't work, they don't work. That's fine. And I am going to talk about that, I think, in my next podcast. So look for that next week, because somebody asked about new topic, like new products and being afraid to put those out. Same thing. It's just, imposter syndrome can really hold you back, but you need to just stop and look at why you feel that way. And that's the hard part, because a lot of times it's somebody who is very close to you who has this effect on you. And it's just the admitting that to yourself. But once you understand why you feel that way, it'll be a lot easier to get over it. Anyway, okay, so give this video a thumbs up. I know it was very rambling, but that's how I roll. And I will talk to you all next week. And I will talk about doing products, like designing. Next week I'll talk about designing products and knowing when it's a good time to send them out into the world on their own. Okay, because I don't know that there is a good time. Anyway, I'll talk to you next week.